discover more about the nature of reality and help create a better life for yourself and the rest of the planet. My name is Icke and I've created a process called Draw Your Reality. For more information, you can go to my website, nikkipalmer.com, and receive a free gift that I put together just for you.
Well, I'm sorry that Nigel Farage stepped back, because if you look at UKIP, which was the powerhouse behind the pressure for Brexit and the referendum over many, many years, it wasn't so much a political party, it was one man, it was Nigel Farage. And there will be many things about Nigel Farage's wider politics that I wouldn't agree with, but on Brexit, he has been absolutely consistent and the forefront personality in bringing it about. If we look back, the referendum was only agreed to by the then Prime Minister David Cameron because he was frightened of UKIP, in other words, Nigel Farage, taking more and more support at the ballot box from the Conservative Party. Ironically, he was also taking from the opposition Labour Party as well. So the idea was, because Cameron at that time was in a coalition government with the Liberal Democrats, and the Liberal Democrats are absolutely so addicted to the whole European Union idea that they would not have anything to do with a referendum. And as it came up to the election, where Cameron is trying to mitigate the impact of Nigel Farage and UKIP, he thought the way to do it is to offer a referendum, because then he would, dilute the support for UKIP. And the reason he did that is because all the opinion polls were saying that the election was going to go again into a coalition between the Conservative Party of Cameron and the Liberal Democrats. And he knew the Liberal Democrats, as part of that coalition agreement, would say, we're not having any referendum to come out of Europe. And so he could say, well, I did offer it, but of course I'm being stopped by the Liberals. Unfortunately, and it is unfortunately, ironically, that election gave Cameron an outright victory. So he's stuck then with the promise of the referendum. Then they think, well, all we've got to do is instigate Project Fear, frighten the great unwashed into being too fearful of voting to come out, and everything will be fine. Well, they found out it was different, and it wasn't like that. And they had a massive shock. The whole political class had a massive shock, not just in Britain, but across Europe. And I do wish that Nigel Farage had just have kept going through this transition period of Brexit and kept the pressure on, because it was obvious, within an hour of the referendum result, I was posting on the internet, this is just the start. These people are not going to go quietly because they don't want this to happen. And all we've seen, Jason, in the last 2 years is an increasing pressure to overturn the Brexit result and to create the chaos which we're now seeing to justify a second referendum. And if you look at the whole history of this European Union project, it has been one of imposing its will upon the population with more and more centralization of power. And whenever a referendum came up in places like the Netherlands and France and Ireland, what they would do is, if it went against them, they would do one of two things. They would do what they're doing now in Britain, which is to increase the pressure for a second referendum to overturn the first, which is what they did in Ireland. Or, in the case of the Netherlands and France, when they rejected what became what was called at the time, the European Constitution, they simply kept 98% of what was in the Constitution, called it a treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, and then said, oh, well, it's not a constitution anymore, it's a treaty, and therefore the referendum result, turning down the Constitution, in the Netherlands and France is no longer valid, and they got what they want through another means. And what does that tell you? There is an agenda for the centralization of power across the whole of Europe in the hands overwhelmingly of bureaucrats, and they are not going to take no for an answer from anyone in Europe. And that's why I knew within an hour, or immediately, never mind an hour, it's when I posted it, that this was going to happen with this referendum result in Britain, and it's what's happening now. So if Nigel Farage comes back and does what he did before, well, that's a good thing, but it's a mess at the moment. Well, I think, Jason, you just answered the question. He obviously perceives that trying to go again and kick on to win, if there is a second referendum, then it's not credible any longer, he believes, to do it through the UK Independence Party, UKIP. So starting another one is where he says he wants to go. But the powers are lining up now to stop this. And what's been happening below the surface in the shadows for the last 2 years is now coming to the surface. We've had this conspiracy in the background between the political class of Britain and people like Tony Blair and the bureaucratic cabal in Brussels. And you see, it's been a pincer movement. If you look at what's going on, and without Farage being out there in the centre of the public debate as he was before, then this conspiracy has been increasingly given free rein in terms of controlling the debate. And it's worked like this. The way to have, if you really cared about Brexit, the way for Theresa May and the Conservative government to have gone about this would have been to say, right at the start 2 years ago, what we're going to do is we're leaving on this date, at the end of this transition period, in March 2019. That's it. So what we're going to do, European Union, is we are now going to prepare for an exit from the EU at that date, irrespective of whether we make a trade agreement with you or not. It's going to happen, and we're now going to start preparing for the fact that maybe we won't have a trade agreement. At that point, you are in a situation where we have a big trade deficit, Britain, with Europe. So Europe and European companies are going to lose out more than Britain is if we came out without a deal. And you would then have had the ears of the bureaucrats being told very clearly by major economic interests in Europe, hey, we're going to do a deal here because we can't lose the massive profits we make from our sales of our profits and services in Britain. And that would have then made it a more equal negotiation. Instead, what Theresa May has done for 2 years is allow the European bureaucrats to set the negotiation. And everything that has been asked for that's worth calling Brexit, they have blocked. And at the same time, the other side of this conspiracy, if you like, in Britain, the political class here, which overwhelmingly doesn't want Brexit, has been working to undermine Theresa May. And it's reached the point now where the Labour Party, the opposition party of Jeremy Corbyn, is demanding that the government acknowledge openly and accept that there will not ever be a Brexit without a trade agreement with the EU. And what has that done? I think that the Labour Party, Jason, in Britain, led by Jeremy Corbyn, has been an absolute disgrace over this. And I think they're going to get some comeback from massive numbers of natural Labour supporters in the urban areas of Britain, particularly England, who are going to see that they are being sold out by the party that that claims to represent them. Because what's happened with this no Brexit without a trade deal is it's handed all the aces to the European bureaucrats. Because what they've said is, okay, and of course this has been pushed and pushed by the political class in Parliament for 2 years. We mustn't come out without a trade deal. And what that's done in terms of the bureaucrats, it's allowed them to say this: well, they're not going out without a trade deal, and they can't have a trade deal except on the terms we agree. So therefore, we're going to offer a deal that gives all the advantages to the European Union and basically none to Britain. And we can do that because we know that they're not going to come out without a deal, and we control the deal. And that's why you've ended up, Jason, with this Theresa May deal that was voted out by Parliament, by the House of Commons, in a record vote against number. It's because it's the deal offered by the bureaucrats, which gives us nothing, in fact would hold us with great potential to connect us to the EU ongoing. And now when Corbyn comes out and says, for me to talk to you, Prime Minister, you've got to agree first that there's going to be no leaving the European Union without a deal. Well, that's not just handed the aces to the European Union bureaucrats, it's handed the whole pack. Because now they say, well, we've offered this deal, right? Okay. And you're not going to come out without a deal, so we control the deal. And that's why they're now saying, when Theresa May is desperately trying to say, can you give us a bit more so I can get this through? They're saying, no, we're not budging. It's less than nothing or nothing. And that's because of the way the political class has undermined Brexit. And I do know that there are people who voted to stay in the European Union in this country, who among the members of the public, who are so disgusted with the way this has been handled and the approach of the European Union that they say now if there was a second referendum, then they would vote to come out. But of course, you look at these repeat referendums like the one in Ireland. What happens is when the second one comes around, because let's not forget this, they were caught out by the first. They never thought the population of Britain in a majority would vote to come out of the European Union, because they thought Project Fear would sort that out. So they had a big shock, and they were a bit complacent because they thought, piece of cake to win this referendum. If a second one comes along, then the money galore will be thrown at it, manipulation galore will be thrown at it, and we should not forget one of the great if you like, canaries in the coal mine is George Soros. If George Soros is for something and wants something or wants to stop something, then it's bad for humanity. That's been basically my experience of George Soros, researching him over 30 years. And he's pouring money in. He's not even a British citizen, Jason. He's an American citizen. And he's pouring money into to groups in Britain to stop Brexit. So obviously the multi-billionaire elite don't want Britain to come out, and that's part of what's going on. Well, if you look at where people get their perceptions from about anything, it's from information received. And of course, the major central source of information that people receive is from the mainstream media, and they do have their perceptions quite demonstrably molded by that bias. But, and I tell you, having done what I've done over the last 30 years, uncovering this and putting information out that puts the world in a completely different perception, that people are getting in, not just in Europe, not just in Britain, but around the world, they're getting more and more in greater numbers, streetwise, to the fact that this system of politics and parties and all this stuff does not represent them. It's starting to dawn on more and more people that there is a political class, and it goes across parties, and it looks at its self-interest rather than the interests of the population it's supposed to be representing. And what is happening is that this what's happened with Brexit, what's going on now, has streetwised more and more people and has made most, at least, of those that voted to come out even more determined, because it has shown them very clearly it's not just a intellectual concept. There is a political class that represents its own interest and not the population. They have had 2 years now, Jason, of seeing it in their face that this is not the case. We had a referendum to come out of the European Union. Now we saw the first process of weakening that by this concept of a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit. That was the first mind game that started to be played quite early on in the transition period. And that was to start to divide and rule and to confuse what Brexit meant. And of course, a soft Brexit meant basically no Brexit at all, because you're still massively controlled by the European Union. And a hard Brexit was coming out without a deal and then taking it from there. And so this has become, if you watch the process, it's very clear. You've gone from Brexit, out of the European Union, vote, referendum, very clear, done, to, but do they mean a soft Brexit or a hard Brexit? And all that started. And now we've reached the point, of course, where the so-called hard Brexit has become something that must be accepted not to happen before any Brexit at all happens. So they have moved the goalposts from what the referendum decided now to, well, it absolutely doesn't mean coming out without a deal. And therefore, it doesn't mean Brexit, because it means we're going to continue to be tied to the rules, regulations of unelected dark suits in Brussels. And what people are doing, Jason, is they're looking at this. They're looking at the Conservative Party, many of which, crucial numbers of which, don't want Brexit. You look at the Labour Party, where the great majority, the overwhelming majority of their MPs, which look more to Tony Blair still than to Jeremy Corbyn, don't want it. Corbyn's been pulled more and more and sucked into that, which is why someone who spent most of his political career wanting to come out of the EU is now saying we must not have a Brexit that takes us out of the EU, which is essentially what he's saying. And people are seeing how this political class has absorbed their referendum vote to the point now where it's almost meaningless unless we do come out in March without a deal. And when you look at the numbers in Parliament and you look at what Theresa May has agreed to in terms of Parliament must have the final say, you're in a situation now where what the public decided 2 years ago is irrelevant. It's gone. We're now down to what kind of non-Brexit are we going to have, if a Brexit at all, which is the ideal they want, which is a second referendum that just overturns the first. And you'll note this, in all these referendums that the EU doesn't like over the years, when they force a second one and they get the result they want, there's no more referendums. It's because it's the EU is a scam. It's a conspiracy to centralize power in Europe, the entirety of Europe, into the hands of a handful of people. This is why more and more laws and decision making, once made by nation state governments, has been sucked into the Brussels bureaucracy, and why nation state laws are subordinate to whatever is decided in the EU. This is a tyranny. You call it fascist, you call it communist. There's very little difference between them in terms of the population and their experience of either. But whatever it is, it's a tyranny. It's a bureaucratic tyranny. And two things. One, it doesn't want Britain to leave, because the idea is for more and more countries to get sucked into the European Union. I mean, I said years ago when the Soviet Union broke down, you're going to see now that these countries of the former Soviet Union are going to get pulled into the EU, and they're going to get pulled into NATO, because that's what the game wanted. And you have reached the point now where a country, a major country, was in danger of leaving. Well, that's the last thing they want. And the other thing is, they don't want a smooth Brexit, where Britain smoothly comes out with balanced and sensible negotiations, because that says to other countries in Europe, places like Italy and others, who absolutely are getting more and more sceptical of this web of the EU. It says to them, hey, you can come out too, and it's fine. They don't want it to be fine in Britain. They want chaos, because they want it as a warning to everyone else in Europe. See what happens if you want to leave us. Well, I don't think she's 100% motivated by it, but when you do what I do, you investigate official narratives to see if they stand up, and they usually don't. What you do is you find different techniques that have been used and repeated, a pattern of techniques. I could talk about lots of them, but this is the relevant one. Franklin Roosevelt, when he was campaigning for election as the Second World War was beginning to unfold in Europe, he said, I tell you, mothers of America, your sons and daughters are not going to fight in that war in Europe, because that was what was going to get him elected. But I tell you, from not just my research, but endless other research, he knew they were. And what happened is, along came Pearl Harbor, for which the official story is extraordinarily not true in terms of how it came about. But that's another story. But because of Pearl Harbor, he could say, look, I told you we weren't going to take part in that war in Europe. But of course, we've got to now because of this. So he gets what he wants, and the people behind him get what he wants, but he's in the clear with the public, because they're saying, whoa, yeah, Franklin, yeah, I can see. So you look at the situation in regards to Brexit. You say that you're going to deliver Brexit, and it's the will of the people. But of course, this way that it's gone is that she now has an excuse not to deliver Brexit, because she's saying, I can't do it because I can't get support in Parliament. It's not me. I want Brexit. I want to see the will of the people happen. But look, what can I do? And at the very best, if you look at it, we have a Brexit under her deal. This I'm going to deliver Brexit for the people, which is not Brexit at all. It's extraordinarily appalling in terms of the effect on Britain, and the big potential for the European Union to not only go on controlling what happens in Britain, but for Britain at the same time, because of the deal, not to have a say in what happens in Europe. So we're out, but we're not. That's the deal. It's appalling, and she's calling it Brexit. It's not. So there is a great reason to be sceptical about the real motivations of Theresa May. She now has the excuse not to deliver Brexit. And she can go on saying, well, I want to, but the numbers say she can't at the moment. And the only way that any kind of Brexit is going to be delivered, apart from we're coming out and Parliament says they'll stop that, is if the European Union bureaucrats start giving something, like on this backstop clause in relation to the open borders between Ireland and Northern Ireland. If they don't give something on that, which is the big, blocking point where somebody voted against the Theresa May proposals, then she's got nowhere to go. So if you look at it, she's got an excuse not to deliver because the European bureaucrats will only go this far and no further, and she's got an excuse to deliver, not to deliver, by the rest of the majority in Parliament saying, well, this deal is not acceptable to us, so we're not having it. So where do you go from here? it's highly likely that the leave point in March is going to be extended. And the more it's extended, the more the pressure will build for a second referendum. And I think that's probably what the game is. That's highly likely in the circumstances, Jason. Just on the basis of time. But let's look at this. The Theresa May proposals, which she says is the best she's going to get out of Europe, because their negotiations have been appalling for reasons I talked about earlier. If the EU don't give any more, well, what's going to happen? Because the MPs in Parliament have historically voted down that deal in terms of numbers. The EU say we're not budging. So what are they going to do? Just vote again and vote it down? Of course, that's what they would do. And the time is ticking. And I was reading a very interesting article in a British newspaper earlier today, where it's listing all the legislation that has to be passed yet in the British Parliament before this Brexit date in March for that to happen. And it's really ludicrous in the time that is left. So everything points to the fact that when you then add that Parliament is saying we're not having a no-deal Brexit, then if you put all that together, what can there be except, as you accurately put it, kick the can down the street a bit, but not just kick the can down the street and see what happens, kick it down the street to give you more time to pressure for a second referendum. That's what the political class is trying to do, and the public is being the pro-Brexit public is being marginalised as a result, and so you can't see that Britain will be out of Europe in March. I mean, it's very difficult to see any scenario whatsoever that will bring that about. Well, I think that's the scenario that that the political class want. I mean, you're absolutely right. The only way that we are going to get out of Brexit now, well, there's two ways. One, and one is Brexit. One is fake Brexit. One is we leave on the date without a deal. Now, because she doesn't have a parliamentary majority for that or anything like. That will get voted down unless there's a Damascus experience in Parliament. And given the fact that this political class doesn't want Brexit, I can't see that happening. The other thing, the other possibility, though, the way the numbers look at the moment, is that it's too much of a bridge to cross. Is that people who want a full-out Brexit in Parliament, you look at the Rees-Moggs and people like that, start to see, well, hold on a minute, I can see where this is going. They're going to go to a second referendum, they're going to overturn Brexit, and we're going to get nothing. Maybe we ought to just support the best we can get, so at least there is some kind of Brexit or some kind of return to some kind of sovereignty in Britain, at least on some levels, and not what we've had up to this point with European domination. Now, that is not an impossibility, but when I look at the numbers that voted against Theresa May's proposals last week, that's a massive bridge to cross and to get over. But I am hearing more conciliatory statements now from some of the hard Brexiteers in the Conservative Party, if you like, who must be now realising. I mean, they must have realised from the start that the plan was to stop it, and here maybe we have to move towards the best we can get rather than have nothing at all. But all these possibilities are all sitting there, and where it goes will be very interesting. But what you can say for certain is the majority of politicians in Britain want to stop it, and from that point of knowledge, current events and events over the last 2 years become easy to understand.